Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. And today I want to talk about class versus skill based role playing games. I've read a lot of discussion online about this for years. Some people think classes are the way to go, they're original, they're how things were done a long time ago, they're tried and true and tested. I've read other people say, no, skills are the way to go, they're the best. They're the new wave, even though they've been around for 20 years. I think that the real answer, of course, is a little one, a little the other. So, what I wanted to do is talk about the pros and cons of class based systems because I realized every pro of class is a con of skill and vice versa. So, let's talk about why designers and players even like class based RPGs. So, first off, classes provide a nice bundle of skills and feats and other things. It's the designer's way of saying, hey, I've already pre picked a bunch of things that work well together and have been designed together and balanced together. So when you pick a fighter class, it's good for fighting. When you pick a wizard class, it's good for doing magic. When you pick a rogue class, it's good for stealing. It just, these things come with, luckily, with a good kind of baggage that tell you how to play that class. Plus, at least for fantasy games, there are so many tropes that exist for fantasy, and I'll talk about that in a bit, that classes being one of them is just makes it very easy to know what you're getting, which gives me my second advantage of class-based systems. They're very easy to understand. For you, the player, who is coming to a new system, when you see, oh, there's a fighter, I have an idea of what he's going to do. Oh, there's a rogue, I have an idea what he's going to do. And it's not just for you, the player, playing that character. If you're playing in a party, it's very easy for them to understand what you're going to do and what your role in the party is going to be. If you're playing a fighter type, you're going to tank. You're the one who's expected to wade, forth and attack that monster. If you're playing a wizard, you're probably going to hang back and shoot spells. Yeah, there are two classes, and yeah, there are some classes that hybridize those two things. But in general, people know what those roles are. Which brings me to the third reason class-based systems are good, is when you first start a class-based RPG, it is very easy for you to pick a character. Not only are they easy to understand and all the skills are bundled, it just makes it easier for you to pick one because there aren't hundreds of choices. There's usually 6, 10, maybe 15. That's a lot easier to pick than looking at lists of hundreds of skills and wondering, gee, I wonder which one of these are going to be used in this campaign. There was a character that a friend of mine made when I ran a GURPS campaign, and she put most of her points into savoir faire because she thought of her character as this uptown elegant lady. And of course, when combat broke out, she was like, can I savoir faire them? And I asked her exactly what she meant by that. I said, if you can role play it, I'll let you roll. And it was hard to come on, like someone's shooting at you with a gun and you're like, that's, that's a really low class way of acting, don't you think? I'm like, not sure what you're trying to get to happen with that guy with the gun. But it just kind of emphasizes the point of if she had had a few classes to pick from, that would have been a lot easier. But there were literally in GURPS hundreds of skills. She had no idea what was going to happen. Similar to this, once you're playing the game and you level up, it's easy to level a class because they usually come with a list of skills that they're allowed to buy and feats they can advance. And those are often restricted by level, or some of them, like there are skills that are marked as specifically for that class, so spending a point in them is worth more than if you buy an off-class skill. So you're already guided on how to level up this character. Where in a skill-based system, who knows? And then similar to that, as you adventure and find items, in a class-based system, it's really easy to decide who gets the items. Sometimes items are restricted to a class. Like something will drop and they said, this is wizard only, or this is thief only. Great, we only have one in the party, they get it. But like if a sword drops, you're probably going to give that to the fighter. Maybe the cleric can't even use it. Or the rogue may want it, but if the fighter is currently doesn't have a magic weapon and it's a magic sword, you probably want to give it to the fighter first. Then if another magic weapon drops, you can give that to the rogue. And of course the wizard and the cleric don't care about those things. So classes make it very easy to distribute items among the party. And then the last big reason class-based systems are popular have nothing to do with players, but everything to do with the designers. It is much, much, much easier to balance a class-based system because there's only, like I said, a few classes you can buy. And those come with pre-bundled feats and skills. It's very easy to balance classes against each other, so no one class is much, much better than another class. In particular situations, yeah, there will be one class that's a lot better than another class. One-on-one fight with an orc, I'd rather be a fighter than a wizard. A one-on-one fight with an orc face-to-face, of course you don't want to be a wizard. Maybe if they start at a distance and you have time to get a spell off, maybe. But the advantages and disadvantages of those classes have already been examined by the designer or the design team and balanced out. That's almost impossible to do if you have hundreds of skills. There will always be some skills that are so situational that somebody who buys up them is just not going to be good in any other situation, which kind of brings me to the downside of classes. When you play a class-based RPG, you kind of have to know how you want to play right away, because that's there's only so many classes, and they're very limited on what they can do. You want to cast spells? Don't take a fighter. You want to wade into battle? You probably don't want to be a wizard. If the party really needs a healer, that pretty much restricts what that class is going to be. You basically have to decide that. If you're making a party and you want a healer, someone's got to play it and someone's got to take that class. Which brings me to the second negative for class-based systems, which is you don't get to play how you want. You may have this really cool idea in your head, but it doesn't really fit with the existing classes. Let's say you're playing D&D and you want to be Indiana Jones, which means you have a gun and a whip and archaeology skill. Well, there's really no good class that covers that. You could probably be a fighter, but that comes with a whole bunch of things that aren't Indiana Jones, and you just have to ignore them. You could be a rogue, but that also comes with a bunch of skills that you're never going to use, or because they're there and probably good, maybe you will use them, but now your character of Indiana Jones isn't really acting like Indiana Jones. The game is telling you how to act, not your conception. And that's a problem with class-based games, is the wonderful tropes that make it very easy to pick and level up a class also kind of define how they're going to play them. To a big extent. It doesn't determine your personality or your background, but I'm talking about, like, in terms of actions, it's kind of predefined what you're going to do. And then the other thing about class systems, which is a negative, is you can't experience extreme characters. The advantage I talked about all the classes being balanced by a designer, that's great if that's what you want, is balance. I love extreme characters. I love playing a character where I put a ton of points into a few things. I had a GURPS character once that I gave an 18 dexterity to. That took almost all my points. So the few points I had left over, I think I got him, he had a rapier, and he had the skill in that. So he was good at stabbing people and parrying, but if something got by his parry, he tended to go down. And his attacks didn't do much damage because he wasn't very strong, but he would almost always hit. And so he'd kind of like whittle down enemies. It was an extreme character and really cool. You may not be able to make that in all class-based systems. My friend's Savoir Faire character certainly couldn't be made in most class-based systems. So everything I just said about classes that are pros are cons in skills. It's you in skill-based systems. You don't have bundled skills. They're not necessarily easy to understand for a starting person. It's not easy for you to join a group and them to understand exactly what you can do. It's hard to pick what skills you want out of the hundreds of skills. When you level up, you're faced with that decision again. Do you want to continue up the skills you already have, or do you want to pick a new skill from the hundreds of skills that are available? And there's no guarantee that the selection of skills you pick will be balanced by the designer in that game. Or even if he tried to, who knows, like in GURPS where the setting can be wildly different, Savoir Faire would be great in a city-based campaign, really bad in a dungeon adventuring campaign. So I think it requires a lot of intervention from the GM when you have skill-based systems, if you want that. The cons of class-based are the pros of skill. You have an idea in your head, you can play that exact character exactly how you want with the skills you want, even if they're really extreme and they don't fit any trope for the setting you're playing. So I like that. In some ways, everything I just described about class versus skill, you can say about fantasy versus sci-fi settings. The advantage that fantasy settings have is because all these tropes exist, the character knows, the player knows what a vampire is. Now, yeah, Twilight vampire is very different than a masquerade vampire, but in general, it's this blood-sucking spirit, supernatural creature. But when you go to play sci-fi, that is incredibly setting specific. What's a Darlock? Do you even know? Do you even know where that's from without having to Google it? I thought it was Doctor Who. It's not. Oh, but what's a Reaper? Oh, wait, that is Doctor Who. No, it's not. It's XCOM. No, it's not. It's Mass Effect. It's all of them. And those Reapers are 3 wildly different aliens. So, similar to where fantasy and sci-fi have that disparity, so do class and skill-based. And you have to teach the player more in a skill-based system. Now, if you look at all my games, I went skill-based for Fallout and Arcanum, 2 of my first RPGs, and then Outer Worlds, my latest RPG. But then in the middle there, I went class-based for Temple, for Vampire Bloodlines, for South Park, for Pillars, for Tyranny. So you may be trying to decide, well, do you like class-based, Tim, or do you like skill-based? It sounds like you liked skill-based, but then you went into class-based, and then you changed your mind recently. Not really. Here's my rule. I prefer a class-based RPG if it's a multiplayer game or it's a single-player game where the player makes a party of characters. I like how classes define the roles, help make those characters more distinct, and if it's a multiplayer game, help convey to the other players what role you'll be fulfilling. For single-player and single-character RPGs, I like going skill-based. I don't like that restriction of classes. If you want to make some extreme character and play, I almost encourage that. It's fun to see if you can do that. GURPS had a name for mages who only took 1 spell but put all their points in it. Johnny 1 spell. Like you take a fire spell and all you can do is burn things, but wow, can you burn things. It's really bad when you encounter a fire elemental, which is immune to fire. But for everything else, it's awesome. So, and that's just something that you have to learn when you play. So that's kind of the rule I use. Multiplayer and party-based games, classes, single player, single character game, skill. If push came to shove and you gave me a bag of money, I'm going to pick single player, single character so I can go skill-based. On my teeter-totter, I'm a little more skill-oriented than class, but that doesn't mean I don't understand why class-based design is good and what it's used for. Okay, I think that's a lot of thoughts on class versus skill. I'm sure you have your own thoughts. I just kind of wanted to get it all down. It's come up a few times in comments, and it was on my list of topics to talk about anyway.